Hey guys, welcome back. Today, we're gonna be redesigning some logos. I asked you guys to send me some of your work, and I was gonna take a look at those, maybe critique it a bit, and then change a few things and make my own version of your designs. We got some really interesting submissions, and most of them were logos, so that's what we're gonna focus on today. And remember guys, anything I say here, it's not meant to put anybody down or say that their work is bad or anything like that. I'm just giving some of my thoughts with the information that I have and showing you what I would do in some of these different situations. Our first logo comes to us courtesy of Ian. He said this is a logo for an ice cream company, and they sell fresh organic ice cream from Canada. They wanted to keep it pretty rustic, and they like the blend of retro elements mixed with modern design. And this logo actually comes with a pretty cool story. According to Ian, the bear's name is Bannock, and he's kind of a grumpy sort of fellow, and the beaver's name is Timber. And he's a bit more chipper and happy. And these two creatures get together way back in the northern woods of Canada, and they make the ice cream. And then they bring that ice cream back to share with the world. So just right off the bat, I think Ian nailed it with the colors. And I also think he did a great job with the textures, especially on this font. It gives it a really down-to-earth, woodsy feel. I think individually, a lot of these elements are really cool, but I feel like some of these things would be better off used in promo materials and not necessarily all smushed together into the brand's logo. Because when you have this much information in a single logo, it's hard to tell what you're actually supposed to focus on. For example, the first thing my eyes are drawn to is this giant leaf in the background. And so while it's super easy to tell this is a Canadian brand, the actual name of the company may not stick in our minds as much. So we definitely need to work on that hierarchy and make sure the name is the most prominent thing in the logo. Also, we have a lot of different textures going on. Several elements on the logo have these sort of dashed line type patterns, but then our text has sort of this worn away look. And you certainly could use those different textures together, but I think for something like a logo, it's better to keep things a little more cohesive and use a similar design language across the entire thing. And one more thing to think about is that when this logo gets really small, these lines are so thin right now, they're just gonna disappear and you're not gonna be able to see them. And then we also have this drop shadow around the whole logo. And while of course there can be some exceptions, shadows like this are just something you don't really wanna have to depend on in the logo. And I think this is the perfect chance for me to introduce you guys to Logo Lab. This is a website me and my brother actually made a couple years ago. It's completely free, and the link is in the description if you want to check it out. But basically, it's just a place where you can upload a logo, and the website will actually run that through a series of visual tests, and it can help you see where your logo might need to be adjusted just a little bit. So I'm going to use Ian's logo and show you how it works. Basically, we just click to upload a logo, and here you can see the logo we just uploaded, and if we scroll down, we'll start to see some of those visual tests I was talking about. This first one will show you the balance of your logo, just to make sure it's not leaning too heavily towards one side. Next, we have some color experiments, and here you can see what your logo would look like in grayscale, so it just takes all the color away. And this is just a really good way of seeing what the silhouette of your logo would look like, as well as maybe what areas you might need to change from the colored version to make a black and white version work. Moving on, we have the colorblind section. So this section will help you visualize what your logo looks like to people with different forms of color blindness, which I think is actually really handy to know because we all want our logos to be easily visible to the largest amount of people possible. And I think the next section is one of the most important, and it's all about scalability. We can see what the logo looks like at a pretty regular size, and then it gets progressively smaller. And just like I was saying earlier, you can really see how all of the textures we had on that logo are just completely gone at this size. After that, you can see how your logo fits into different size containers. And this is super helpful to see how your logo would work on different marketing materials, for example. There's a few more sections after that, like showing you what the logo looks really pixelated. And we've also got a blur section. And the main thing I use this for is removing detail from the logo and seeing what really pops out. Because actually, squinting your eyes and looking at a piece of artwork or design is a really good way to see the overall composition without getting too bogged down in the details. And just like I was saying earlier, this big red Canada leaf is the thing that draws the most attention visually. And some of these other areas that maybe we'd like to be more prominent just kind of fade away. This next section shows us what the logo looks like in different slices, and I think this is pretty cool because if you can recognize your logo from just a small part of it, it means that the full thing is visually strong and most likely pretty memorable. And the last couple sections just show you what your logo would look like as an app icon, as well as how it compares to other maybe more famous logos. So like I said, Logo Lab is completely free. If you guys think this would be useful to you, check it out, and maybe it'll help you on your next logo project. So to kick off this redesign, the first thing I'm going to do is extract some of these elements. Mainly just the shape of the shield, the leaf, and then of course that awesome color palette that you had. And while I do like this font, I do think I'm going to get a few other options just so we have some things to choose from. The thing I think to keep in mind here when we're choosing this font is that lengthwise, Bannock and Timbers aren't super short words, and so if we want our logo to stay in a pretty tight footprint, I feel like one of these more slender fonts would probably be easier to use. So I'll get rid of all of our fonts but these two thin ones. Both of these have that rustic feeling we're looking for, but I think this top one is a lot easier to read. The edges of this bottom font are just a little bit too rough. So I know that the one element I definitely want to keep from that logo is this leaf. So as far as how we lay this out, we could just take the text and stick that leaf right beside of it, or we could even have it to where the leaf is right above the text. And for this new version, I'd like to find a way to incorporate the leaf into the logo without making it the main focus. Looking at this version here, it almost seems like if we shrunk this leaf down, we can maybe put it between these two words. I think that's a pretty interesting way to use the leaf to where it's not the main focal point, but it's still important because we're basically using it to tie our two main words together. But now we put ourselves into a spot to where the logo is really long and it's not very tall at all. So I definitely like to try to work back to a format more like Ian originally had it, to where the words were stacked on top of each other. Ideally, we can move both of these words closer together, but then either we cover up our leaf or the leaf covers up part of our text. So maybe what we could actually do is basically just to change the height of some of these letters to where they wrap around the leaf. But before we start manually adjusting these letters, I'd like to get rid of all of this grungy texture in them. So to get rid of that texture, I'm just gonna take a screenshot of this text and paste that into Photoshop. And then I can just paint away some of these white texture spots that I really don't want there anymore. And now that we've got all those spots filled in, I'll just copy that and paste it back into Illustrator, and then we're gonna do an image trace on it. And basically, that's just taking our image and vectorized it. And now if we wanna adjust any of these letters, we've got a much simpler path to work with. I'm actually gonna get rid of the stem of this leaf. I don't think we really need it, and it just sticks out too much. And now let's start reshaping some of our text. We'll start by stretching out the letters on the ends of each word. And then we'll start vertically stretching out some of these other letters. And then I'll just clean things up a little bit. And I actually think we could grab that badge that was a part of the original logo, make it bigger, and change it to an outline shape. And since we don't have too many sharp angles in our logo, I'm gonna round the bottom of this as well. And to better fit the words, we can make this a little thinner. One thing though that the original version did have was this tagline that said Canada's Ice Cream Company. And I actually think that's pretty helpful to have, because if you just saw this version or even this older version without any of that information, you wouldn't really know that it's an ice cream brand. And we've actually got two pretty nice spaces that we can add words in, and so maybe we can split that tagline up into two different parts. Canada's can go at the top, and instead of ice cream at the bottom, I'm gonna use something simpler and say creamery. As for the font for these, I'd like to pick something that's roughly in the same vein as our main logo font, but that still has a little personality of its own. That way we don't get all of our text running together. Now, one thing Ian did do on the original logo was curve some of this text to fit the badge, and I think that would actually be a pretty nice thing to do to our Canada's Creamery text. That'll definitely flow better with the shape of the badge, but that'll also help add some separation between our main logo text and this subtext. And here's what our new logo could look like on a darker background. And if you did want to add in any of these extra colors, you could definitely do that around the badge's edge. We can make it that light blue color, or even that vibrant orange color that was used in the original design. One thing you might notice though is that our white version of the logo looks a little bit thicker than our dark version. And really it's just more of an optical illusion type thing. Something that's white on a dark background will always look thicker than something that's dark on a white background. And so when you're making versions of logos to go on dark backgrounds, make sure you take that visual effect into account. And so if we add just a little bit of a dark stroke around all of our white text, that'll help both versions to feel equally thick. All right guys, here's our final redesign of Ian's logo. I think we were able to keep that outdoorsy vintage feel while still simplifying down all the concepts in the original logo. I feel like this is a modern mark that keeps focus on the name and a little bit less on the imagery, and that way the logo can be used in a large variety of different places, and some of those more illustrative elements and textures in the original version could be leveraged and used in some of the marketing materials they have, as well as possibly even the ice cream packaging. So I want to know what you guys think. I'm going to put a poll up in the corner. Make sure to vote and let me know if we improved the logo or if you still like the original one better. And once again, thanks Ian for sending this in. And our next logo comes courtesy of a man named Chris. Chris told me that he runs a computer store and it's called Green Eggs and Ram. Basically, they sell computers and computer parts, they do repairs, and apparently, April 1st marks 24 years since the business first opened, and Chris, we hope the next 24 years are just as good as the first. So he told me that basically he didn't want a really corporate, stuffy logo, and he was a huge Dr. Seuss fan, so when he thought of this name, he knew instantly that that's what the business was going to be called. He also said he wanted the business to feel really approachable, because you know, for some people, going to a computer store can be a little bit intimidating if you don't know that much about computers. So it seems to me Chris just really wanted to build a place that felt open and welcome to everybody. Apparently this logo is about 15 years old, and one major pain point they're having with this is being able to fit it inside of a social media icon. And so that's something we'll definitely try to address. First off, let me just say I think this is a killer name. It's really clever, and it definitely accomplishes that goal of making this business not feel intimidating at all. And I'm just guessing, but I bet having this fun, approachable brand definitely sets them apart from other computer stores in their area. I also like that Chris uses the color green since he does talk about green eggs, as well as the fact that a lot of computer parts are actually colored green, so I think that's smart. Where I do think we run into a little bit of trouble though, is that a lot of times it can be really hard to make a logo that's fun and inviting and that doesn't take itself so seriously without it starting to feel kind of childish. And since the name is also based off of a children's book writer, I think it makes it that much harder to make this feel like it's not for kids. In addition to that, I definitely see that Chris wanted to really bring attention to the word RAM, since that's really the only thing in the logo that ties it back to computers. But I think the style of this kind of just clashes a little bit too much with the styling of the rest of the logo. Not only is it a completely different font, but also the black strokes on these letters aren't the same width all the way around them like they are on the rest of the logo. And so those different styles just make things hard to feel cohesive. And so to start out this redesign, I'd like to get some concepts down. We've got a situation here to where the name is really clever, but certain aspects of the name don't really tie that well into the main business. You know, you just wouldn't think of eggs going with computers. So maybe what we should do first is get some visual representations of eggs and computers. And I just grabbed some really quick icons to help us think through this. So here's some visual ways to simply represent an egg. We could have an intact whole shell, or we could have a cracked shell, or we could show the egg outside of the shell. And I also grabbed some imagery for the computer side of this. We just have a computer monitor here, as well as the circuit board, you know, something you'd find on the inside of a computer. Since this business has been around for a while and people probably know it by name, we definitely want to lean in on the egg aspect of it, but we also want to bring in this computer part a little bit more. I feel like if we used a cracked eggshell or even the egg itself, we might be leaning a little bit too much into that egg aspect though. So maybe if we use this whole shell version of the egg, we could still play off of the egg theme without it completely dominating the logo. So let's just go ahead and start with this egg as a base, and maybe we can integrate some of this more computer type stuff later on. So what I'm thinking is maybe we can take our original green eggs and RAM text and put that inside of our egg shape. The first thing I want to do though is find a different font for our text. I've got a few different options here, and I think they all keep that fun, approachable vibe that Chris was going for. And I did capitalize all of our text because I think it helps feel a bit more cohesive that way. And you know, since our text is going inside of the egg, I think it would be pretty cool to visually play this off like the words are the actual inner part of the egg, which means they could be a little bit sloppy, slightly liquidy, and they don't have to perfectly fit together. And I definitely think these top two fonts represent that idea much better than this bottom one, mainly because it has too many sharp edges. And between these two, I feel like this one is just a little bit more legible than this one. So now let's just make our egg solid. And since it is a green egg, let's give it that color. And then we can go ahead and start placing some of this text inside the egg. I'm gonna start with the RAM because it's the only word that connects this logo to computers. And I think it's a good idea for it to be the largest word inside the egg. And since we do want these letters to feel like liquid inside the egg, maybe we could twist them a little bit to better fit the shape of this shell. Now let's go ahead and get our other words in here. We're gonna put green at the top. Eggs will of course go underneath that. And last but not least, we've got and that'll fit snugly right in here. These letters definitely need to be white though. And one thing I do think we can do to better separate the words green eggs and RAM is to change this from the word and to just an ampersand. Because not only is it less words to read, but using that symbol instead will also help break up the two chunks of words that we do have. And let's just bring back in our computer icons. And you know, like I was saying earlier, a lot of computer chips are green. And oddly enough, this egg could maybe kind of pass as an oval computer chip. And the main thing that makes this icon look like a computer chip is these various connections and wires. So what if we brought some of those elements over to our egg? But instead of making them perfect circles and lines, I'm gonna actually hand paint them in because I think it'll just match the handmade fluid feel of the font. And I think we can make these wires and connections yellow to better match that common image of circuit boards we all have in our head. And now I just want to adjust some of the position of these elements to better fit with inside this shape. And there's one more thing I want to change. When you use a handwritten style font like this in a logo, if you have a letter that's repeated multiple times throughout the logo, especially if they're right next to each other, it's a really good idea to tweak those a little bit just to make them individually different. And you want to do this because a handwritten font is meant to look like it's written by hand. And nobody writes the same letter the same way multiple times. So I'll just adjust some of these G's and E's, and that'll be a wrap. And guys, there we've got it. I think we kept that same quirky, fun feeling that Chris was going for originally, but we've now got it in a package that feels a little bit more professional by introducing a cohesive font, a more toned down color scheme, and a concept that clearly ties it directly into the computer business. So Chris, thank you so much for sending this in, man. I really appreciate it. And now it's time for you guys to let me know what you think. Once again, there's gonna be a poll in the corner. Vote to let me know if we improved the logo or if you still like the original one better. And our last logo today was sent in by Haley, and she told me that this logo is for a bakery that has kind of a food truck aspect to it. And the basic product is Girl Scout cookies, but for adults, which I think is a really cool idea. She had sent me the logo on this tan background, and Haley, let me just start by saying these colors are really nice. They've got a very vintage vibe, but they still feel like a modern muted color palette. And I think this is a killer illustration. To me, it's the perfect imagery to represent a Girl Scout and an adult woman. There are a few things I think we could tweak just a little bit to make this even stronger. The main issues I see right now is that a lot of times if you have a really thin lined illustration, it doesn't always go very well with a big bold font. So I think we'd either want to use a thinner font here or maybe beef up the illustration a bit. Secondly, all the text right now is very geometric and straight. There's very little variation in the width of any of the letters, but on the illustration, we have a lot of variety of line thicknesses. In some places, the outline is really thick, and in others, it's super thin. And having such a large variety of shapes kind of makes this feel disconnected from the actual word mark. And I think the last thing that's a bit strange is the hat is fully colored in, but the scarf is only partially colored in. So it seems like for this logo redesign, we mainly just want to bring some consistency throughout all of our visuals. Just to get us started, I'm actually going to remove this bakery pop-up. I don't think you really need it. And then I just want to trace over your illustration with a stroke that's the same width all the way around. And there's my result of that. The main thing I changed was just simplifying the sunglasses down a bit. I do think though we could probably get rid of this collar. We don't really have one on the other side, so it feels a little unnecessary. Now let me go ahead and add back in some of these colors. And I do think if we're going to go with a really bold font down here for our name, we need some more filled in elements in the logo. So instead of an outline for the hair, what if we made it solid? And honestly, I really like that. And I'm starting to think we don't actually need some of these other outlines either. So maybe I'll just change the color of this outline to match the hat. And since we can't make the outline of the scarf yellow, because all the shapes would just blend together, I think we could instead make it this background tan color. That way the shapes are still clearly defined and it's all solid objects. And we can't get rid of the line completely under the chin, because then we lose all separation between the head and the neck. So instead of that, let's just get rid of part of it, and then we'll just add a bit of a shadow underneath it. And lastly, to get rid of most of this line for the nose, I think we can just scoot it up against the edge of this lens. And right now, I do feel like the shape of the hair is just a little bit complicated. So I'd like to simplify that up, and I also might do a few tweaks to these other elements just to make them feel a bit tighter. And after a few adjustments, this is what I ended up with. The main things I fixed were some of the perspective issues on the glasses. I refined the jawline a little bit. I made that iconic necktie a bit bigger. And I also simplified down the hair some. And now I think we have a small problem similar to what we started with. In the original design, the text elements really outweighed the illustration. But in the new design, I feel like the text is almost a little underwhelming compared to our illustration. So to remedy that, I'm gonna find a font that's really similar to this, but that's just a bit beefier. And I think this will do really nicely. Gives our illustration a bit more of a base to stand on, and it also brings some focus to the city. And since that was included in the original logo, I assume that's important. One last thing I'd like to do is bring a little bit more color to this. I really do like the color palette that Haley picked out originally, but just so we've got another option, I'm gonna try something that's a bit more vibrant. I feel like these colors just stand out more and really help the entire illustration feel like one solid unit. So guys, here's the end result for this logo. I think Haley did a phenomenal job with the original concept. I really just tweaked the illustration a little bit to fix some of the proportion issues and to help make it feel more balanced against the typography. And we really didn't even have to change the layout that much because we already were working with a strong foundation. So as you might have guessed it, here's another poll up in the corner. So go ahead and vote and let me know if you like this new design better or if you prefer the original. And once again, here's all 3 logos we worked on today. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. Let me know down in the comments which one is your favorite. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and do that so you don't miss any more of these types of videos. And if you like this video and you want to see more, make sure to smash that like button. And if you want your work to be featured in the next critique series, go ahead and send over an email with your design files and a mini brief just describing the project. I had a lot of fun and I hope you guys did too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.